A group of people watched a wheel spin. It stopped on a number. Then they were asked whether the share of countries in the United Nations that are in Africa was higher or lower than that number, and then to give their own estimate. The people who watched it land on 10 guessed around 25%. The people who watched it land on 65 guessed around 45%. Same question, same room, 20 points apart, because of a number they had personally watched a machine pull at random right in front of them. Everyone watched that wheel spin. Everyone could see it was random. Knowing that changed nothing at all. That's the first of 7, and it's the smallest one. The other 6 don't touch your guesses about geography. They decide what you're afraid of, what you're willing to risk, who you think people are, and how you remember your own life. And one of them is going to happen to you before this video is over. While you're watching it, here's what all of them have in common, and it's the reason none of them feel like mistakes from the inside. Your brain has to make thousands of calls a day with nowhere near enough information and nowhere near enough time. So it doesn't calculate. It shortcuts. And most of the time the shortcut is right, which is exactly why you trust it. A cognitive bias is just one of those shortcuts running in a situation it wasn't built for. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't feel like a guess. It feels like knowing. So let's start at your wallet and work inward. Number 1 you've already met. Anchoring. The first number in the room owns the conversation. It's why the crossed out price works. Why the original asking price on a house still shapes the offers months later, long after everyone agrees it was far too high. You don't have to believe the anchor. You only have to hear it. Number 2. Think about what you're actually afraid of. Your brain judges how likely something is by how easily an example comes to mind. Quick to picture must be common. That's the shortcut. So which is more dangerous, the flight or the drive to the airport? You know the answer, but you can see a plane crash. You've watched the footage, read the coverage, seen the headlines. The car ride is invisible. Nothing about it is memorable, so nothing about it comes to mind. Which means your fear tracks what got covered, not what actually happens. And the things most likely to hurt you are usually the boring ones. They never made the news. That's the availability heuristic. Number 3 moves from what you fear to what you'll risk. 600 people are facing an outbreak and you have to pick one of 2 plans. Plan A saves 200 people. Plan B has a 1 in 3 chance of saving all 600 and a 2 in 3 chance of saving nobody. Most people take Plan A, the sure thing. Now the same choice described differently. Plan A, 400 people die. Plan B, a 1 in 3 chance nobody dies and a 2 in 3 chance all 600 do. Now most people take Plan B, the gamble. Nothing changed. 200 saved is 400 dead. Only the wording moved, and it flipped the majority. That's the framing effect. It's why 90% survive and 10% die are not the same sentence, even though they are the same fact. Number 4 is the one you'd expect on this list. Confirmation bias. You go looking for evidence that agrees with you, and you find it because there's always some. But here's the part people miss. You don't reject the evidence against you. You read it more carefully than the rest. You go hunting for the flaw, and you find one because everything has one. Then you nod at the one you liked and move on without checking it at all. It doesn't feel like bias. It feels like having standards. Number 5 is the expensive one. Researchers sold theatre season tickets and quietly gave some buyers a discount. Identical seats, identical plays. The only difference was what they'd paid. The people who paid full price went to more of them, not because they enjoyed them more, because they'd spent more. The money was gone either way, but spent money doesn't feel gone. It feels like an obligation. That's the sunk cost fallacy. Now scale that up. From a theatre ticket to 4 years of a degree you don't want, a decade in the wrong career, a relationship that ended emotionally long before anyone said it out loud. The question is never what you've already put in. It's only ever, knowing what I know now, would I start this today? Number 6 changes how you see everyone around you. Students read an essay defending a political position. They were told plainly that the writer hadn't picked that side. It was assigned. They knew that. And they still came away believing the writer probably meant it. That's the pattern. When somebody else acts, you explain it with who they are. When you act, you explain it with what was happening to you. They're late because they're inconsiderate. You're late because the traffic was insane. Someone else's situation is invisible from where you're standing. So you fill the gap with character. And you're usually filling it wrong. That's the fundamental attribution error. Number 7 is the one that edits you. That's hindsight bias. Once you know how something turned out, you can't accurately remember how unsure you were before it happened. The ending reaches backwards and rewrites your memory of your own prediction. The relationship that fell apart. The signs were obvious. Were they though? At the time? Or did they only become obvious on the way out? This is worse than a quirk of memory. It's why it's so hard to learn from your own life. If you remember calling every outcome correctly, you never discover where your judgment is actually weak. You end up with a version of your past in which you were right far more often than you were. So that's 7. And a fair question at this point is whether any of it actually holds up, because a lot of famous psychology hasn't. So here's the honest answer. In 2014, 36 labs across 11 countries reran 13 classic findings on more than 6,000 people. 10 of them survived. The ones that collapsed were mostly the flashy priming studies from the same era. And anchoring, framing, and sunk cost were all in the 10 that held, which makes what comes next more awkward, not less. Because here's the problem with everything you just heard. Reading a list like this, something happens automatically. You match each one to somebody you know. The relative who only watches the news that agrees with them. The friend who won't leave the job because of how long they've been there. The colleague who insists they saw it coming. What you almost certainly didn't do is spend the last few minutes finding examples of yourself. That's not a character flaw. That's number 8, the bias blind spot. Researchers tested this directly. They described a range of biases, then asked people how much each one affects the average person and how much it affects them personally. Almost everyone rated themselves as less biased than average, which cannot be true of almost everyone. Then another team asked the obvious follow-up. Does being smarter help? They measured reasoning ability and thinking style alongside it, expecting the sharpest thinkers to see themselves more clearly. It didn't shrink. If anything, it leaned the other way. And there's a reason for that. When you look at another person, all you get is their behavior. And biased behavior is easy to spot from outside. When you look at yourself, you get something nobody else gets. The narration, your reasons. And your reasons always sound good, because your reasons are the part the bias reached first. Which leaves one honest question. If you can't feel these from the inside and being clever doesn't save you, what's actually left? Not willpower. You can't concentrate your way out of this. The shortcuts run before you get there. What works is boring and all of it is external. Write your number down before you hear theirs. Decide what would prove you wrong before the evidence arrives, not after. Agree what counts as failure while you can still walk away cheaply. Every one of those does the same job. It takes the judgment out of your head, where the biases live, and puts it somewhere they can't quietly rewrite it. You're not going to stop being biased. Nobody has. But you can stop assuming you're the exception. One last thing. Somewhere in the last few minutes, you thought of a specific person who really needs to watch this. That was number 8. Still running. And if that landed a little too close, good. That's the only sign you'll ever get. Thank you for watching all the way to the end, Hut. It genuinely means a lot. If this video gave you something to think about, do one small thing. Subscribe to CoolMyMind Psychology. Every video here unpacks the hidden psychology behind how we think, feel, and act. And subscribing is how you'll never miss the next one. Take care of your mind, and I'll see you in the next video.